Hey everybody, it's the month of March 2022. Welcome to the Couchbase virtual meetup. My name's Aaron, and with me I've got my good friend Nitish. Nitish, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thanks, Aaron. It's like the weather is really getting better.
Hey, I heard you guys had like some kind of like brownout yesterday where like there was sand or something and it was like super weird. I saw pictures on the internet. What was that all about?
Yeah, it's apparently the desert storm from Sahara Desert.
Wow, that's crazy. You're over in Europe, just so people
Yes.
understand. So yeah, that's crazy. I saw some pictures on the internet. Whew. That looked it looked like Dune, the movie that came out last year. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, folks, we've got an amazing session for you. It is Mobile March. Why is it Mobile March, you ask, right? Well, it's because, well, one, Couchbase Mobile 3.0 shipped. Holy cats, that's amazing. Couchbase Mobile 3 is pretty amazing. I started playing with it probably last August. I think when the developer team said, "Hey, we got a private beta. You want to test it?" And I was just blown away. Super awesome features inside of it. Some stuff that we have. I don't want to spoil all of them because we got Priya going to come on and talk about it a little bit. But I can just tell you a lot of cool features. It's amazing. If you're a mobile developer, it's Christmas again, and it's only in March. I mean, how awesome is that? So that's pretty great. You can learn more about it. We do have a blog post on this, and of course, another thing to kind of bring up, I'll show it in a bit here, is we have a new mobile landing page on our developer website to kind of highlight with this. So if you want to go through and learn more about mobile and like how to start, we've got brand new learning paths that all are compatible with Couchbase Lite 3.0 and Couchbase Mobile. So whether you're a Swift developer, we've got you covered. You're an Android developer, we got you covered. You're on Xamarin, we've got you covered. Everything from how to build an app, how to use a embedded database, how to use something really cool called Sync Gateway, which we'll talk a little bit later about here and stuff. All that stuff's there. We've got sample codes, we've got sample apps for you. All kinds of good information. I know that today your head may be swimming with all the cool stuff you have. If you go here, we've got detailed breakdowns of everything. It's all in one spot, really kind of nice and easy for you. So that's pretty great. Now, with all this excitement, also, we have a really cool talk that's happening on March 23rd. Matt Lynch, super smart guy over at Ionic. They make a cross-platform way of building mobile apps. It's a really, really popular way of doing this. And the really cool things it uses web-based technology. There's a lot of people out there that know React or know Angular. If you have web as your toolkit, you don't want to miss this because this is your ability to take all that knowledge you have on Angular or React, and you could build it in, and you could build a mobile app. It's really, really easy. And so that talk, I highly recommend you register for that if you want to learn more. And specifically, you have those kind of skill sets because there's a lot there to cover. And like I said, Matt's super smart, and of course, Priya, she's also really smart. So we have that kind of going on here. Now, Nitish, I've heard some rumors that you've been working on some playground stuff. Is that true?
Yes, that is correct. So to celebrate the new version of this schema-lite library, we have added some examples onto Playground.
Oh, now that's amazing. What most people don't know is that Couchbase Mobile, we have the word mobile in there, but Couchbase Lite, the embedded database platform, it runs on desktop. So it's really, really versatile as a framework. So, for example, we have Java examples, and those are using the Java framework so that you could use Couchbase Lite with Java. It's not just Android. It's pretty much on Android. Of course, we have a great experience there. But also, if you're building like an Android desktop application, maybe it's a point of sale system, stuff like that, you totally can use Couchbase Lite for that. And also in 3.0, we've got C support, which Priya's going to talk about a little bit. We got examples on that. And I know that you also are working on some other stuff with .NET, right? And that should hopefully ship here shortly. So we should, all those desktop platforms we support, you'll have the ability to run those in Playground, which is super cool. If you ask me, I think it's pretty amazing. Now, of course, the other thing we have, I don't know if I want to launch this. I think I'll just say it, and I'm not going to launch it because I have a lot of Discord stuff. We have a Discord soft launch. And so if you're interested in learning more about Couchbase and Couchbase Mobile, and you just want to kind of hang out with some cool, like-minded developers, we now have Discord. And the link will show up here in a second on the screen. You can basically go to that link if you want, and you can join our Discord community. And I'll be there, Nitish is there, Peter, all of our developer advocates are there. You can ask us questions, all those kind of things, and get some answers. So, or if you just want to chat about cool stuff with building mobile apps or building web apps, I mean, it's a community. That's what its goal is. So, we look forward to seeing everybody there. So, with that, that's most of our housekeeping we have going on here. Like I said, jam-packed action session this month. I mean, we're bringing some of the coolest people I know to talk about mobile because celebrating Couchbase Mobile 3.0, of course. It's a big release. I mean, it's a big deal when we make a 0.0 release. And if you think about it, Couchbase Mobile 2.0 was a couple years ago, and it's that monumental. I mean, there's just so many things that I can't even. I mean, I could spend hours just rattling off all the cool things I like about it. But instead, I want to bring the expert in, and that expert, of course, is Priya. Priya, welcome to the stream. How you doing?
Hi, good. Thank you.
Awesome. Now, I heard that you've got a really great talk for us that you can go through. And I know there's a lot of new people maybe here that maybe they've never seen Couchbase Mobile before, or they're trying to figure out, like, what does it mean? There's all this stuff on the website, and it just seems like there's a lot it can do. Maybe you could break that down and make it a little bit easier for people to understand, like, where the value add in it. But as a developer, also just how cool you could do things. It's going to make your life so much easier when you build mobile apps.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, in fact, mine is actually going to be a one-on-one session, if you will. So if you
Awesome.
don't know Couchbase Mobile, this is the session for you. We as you said, we just launched 3.0, right? But then we've been doing this is many years in the making. So we are not going to just dive right into 3.0. So if you don't know Couchbase Mobile, no worries. I'm going to go over the basics, why we built what we built, and what's in it for you as a developer.
Awesome. Well, let's get right to it. Nitish will show her screen, and I'll jump off and take it away, Priya.
Let me go into slideshow mode. And Nitesh, if you can give me a thumbs up, if you can see my screen and everything is good to go, I'll go ahead. Awesome. Thank you. So, as I said, this is a one-on-one session. So if you're not familiar with Couchbase Mobile, this is a session for you. We will definitely talk about the 3.0 highlights as well. So I'm going to kick things off with a discussion of the common pain points encountered by developers building business critical applications and some use cases. Essentially, what motivated us to build this data platform. Past decade, massive growth in mobile applications, and specifically with COVID in the past 2 years, the way we shop, the way we dine, the way we transact, interact, socialize, it's completely changed. So you walk into a restaurant, you place an order for a meal, your order is automatically synced up to the kitchen. You drive in to a store, you drive up to the curbside, and the store clerk is automatically notified of your arrival and brings out your delivery. Telemedicine, it was growing in popularity, but in the past couple of years is increasingly replacing non-emergency doctor's visits. Mobile test clinics, especially with COVID, you've got vaccination clinics, test centers. They've been popping up everywhere, both rural and urban areas. And also completely changing the way we shop. The just walkout store paradigm where you have a completely touchless checkout experience. That's growing in popularity. And why is it relevant in the context of mobile applications? Because intrinsic mobile device technologies like GPS, Bluetooth, NFC, mobile digital wallets, push notification services, they are all key enablers of these use cases. And why this massive growth in these use cases? Because it's all about customer experience. It's all about efficiency of processes. So to sort of summarize the three key pain points, first, users want applications that are fast and responsive. And why is that? Because user experience or perceived user experience is directly correlated with the performance of the app. So if your app takes too long to launch because it's downloading and pulling data from some remote cloud data center, then chances are users are going to abandon your app and never use it again. Then reliability. Users are very demanding. They want your applications and services to be available regardless of the state of network connectivity. So in other words, it needs to be resilient to temporary or permanent network disruptions. And this is more important when you're talking about business critical applications. You want the services to be on. You don't want to turn away your customers, well, because your store suffered an outage. And of course, security. When you're talking about mobile applications, especially, you're talking about personal information. And a lot of these use cases, you don't want that personal information, especially in the area of healthcare, to be transferred to some remote servers for long-term persistent or analysis. So let's look at a typical centralized cloud-based architecture and see why it doesn't quite fit the bill when it comes to delivering these sort of experiences that we talked about. So a standard model here, you've got a central cloud system, central data centers, and then you've got a bunch of devices. They are pushing, pulling, consuming data, generating data, sending it back to the cloud. Everything is happening over the internet. Internet is up and running. Business is going on as usual. That's great. Well, we know that the internet is inherently unreliable. So what happens if it's slow? It automatically translates to bad user experience. You're going to see this dreaded spinner or please wait while we're loading your data kind of experience. That's terrible. Worse, if you have an outage, what happens? You're going to essentially have business downtime because your applications can no longer function because the data that they are relying on, they don't have access to that. And I already talked about transfer of sensitive private data. Maybe there's information about my lifestyle, my preferences that I really don't want to ever leave the device. I need those preferences to just stay local to my device. Or even in the healthcare, you have a hospital. You don't want patient data to be leaving the hospital floor. Well, you don't really have much of a choice when you're talking about a centralized cloud-based environment. So enter the world of edge computing. So edge computing is all about distributing data processing and data storage. So it's essentially a computing paradigm. It complements the cloud-centric computing paradigm. And the idea is bringing data storage, data processing closer to the edge. So what's the edge? The edge, by definition, is the location. It's a location. It's not one thing. It's a location where people, application, things generate and consume the data. And as I said, it's not one thing. So it's really a spectrum. So on one end of this continuum, you've got edge devices. So think smartphones, tablets, laptops, IoT devices. And then you, on the other end of the spectrum, you've got what we refer to as edge nodes. So think of it as a server in an IT closet in a restaurant, or a server rack in a factory floor, or a data center, a mini data center in a cruise ship. All these are examples of the edge. This is not a centralized cloud-based environment. So I spoke about mobile applications. So really, if you think about it, a mobile device is a concrete example of an edge device. So mobile computing or mobile applications really are a concrete subset or an example of the edge computing paradigm. So let's take a quick look at, we looked at the cloud-centric architecture just a few slides ago, and let's compare it with an edge computing architecture. As a reminder, again, edge computing is a distributed computing topology. So from a conceptual standpoint, there's nothing unique there, right? We know distributed computing, but then it's gaining a lot of traction for the reasons that I'm going to talk about in a second. So you still have the cloud. It's not going away. Edge computing complements cloud computing. But what we have done here with edge computing architectures is introduce the edge layer. And the edge, we've got edge devices. That's the tier which consists of your smartphones and desktops and IoT hardware. And notice the edge node tier. And that can be multiple. You can have multiple tiers of edge nodes. In this particular, for simplicity, in this particular architecture, we've got a single tier of edge nodes that sits between the edge devices and the central cloud servers. Data storage and data processing can happen in any of these tiers. So they happen in the cloud, they happen in the edge devices, or the edge nodes. So why is this beneficial? Now, if you're doing all the data processing closer to the point of consumption, closer to the applications that are generating and consuming the data, you are not going to incur the round trip time latency that it would take to transfer all this data to some backend systems to get that processed. So you're going to have the responsiveness that your users desire. And in fact, if you actually have that data processing happening locally on the edge device, then, well, you're going to get extremely sub-millisecond response times. Then again, you can alleviate data security, data privacy concerns, because the data doesn't have to ever leave the edge. So your factory or your hospital, you can have on-prem data centers, or, well, better still, if it is on your device, it doesn't have to leave your device itself. So what about the three? If you remember, there are three main pain points, right? We talked about speed, security, reliability. So how does edge computing architecture handle reliability? Well, let's consider the case where there's an internet outage. Applications can continue to function because they are going to be serviced by the edge nodes. Well, what if the edge nodes go down? Well, applications that have the embedded database, they can continue to operate. So you essentially get, in theory, 100% availability or guaranteed uptime when your database is co-located or embedded within your application. But of course, we understand that may not always be the case. So for resource-constrained devices or for applications that cannot have an embedded database, you still get the benefits of low latency and privacy if you deploy this in your edge devices. So where does Couchbase Mobile fit into the picture? So for that, as I mentioned, this is a primer, right, on Couchbase Mobile. So let's look at the Couchbase Mobile stack. Focusing on the yellow boxes here, you've got Couchbase Server. This is our flagship, fully distributed NoSQL data platform. So it's got an integrated cache, it's got full text search, eventing, analytics, query indexing, a lot of integrated services. You typically build applications, web backend applications that directly interface with Couchbase Server using one of our many Couchbase SDK clients. So a number of programming languages are supported by these SDK clients. So there you've got Couchbase Server and corresponding SDK clients. Then if you shift your attention to the box in red, you've got Couchbase Lite. Couchbase Lite is a full-featured NoSQL embedded database. Similar to Couchbase Server, it's a JSON document database. So while Couchbase Server is a standalone distributed database, Couchbase Lite, in contrast, is an embedded database. So it's always going to be embedded within an application. It's not standalone. And that application can be a mobile app, it can be a desktop application, or any embedded application. And that's possible with our new C API that we're introducing in 3.0. Well, data storage, data processing happens on Couchbase Lite and on Couchbase Server. That's all great. But at the end of the day, we need data to be synchronizing, right? You need data movement. And that's where the sync gateway comes into the picture. That's the blue box depicted here. It's the middle tier component, sits between Couchbase Lite and Couchbase Server. It's responsible for secure data synchronization between the Couchbase Lite enabled devices and Couchbase Server. In addition to data synchronization, it handles fine-grained access control, authentication, authorization. Sync Gateway Couchbase Lite, from a deployment standpoint, are always co-located in the same data center. So you can deploy it in a central cloud data center. It can be deployed in any distributed edge data center. It can be deployed, it can be containerized, virtual machines, bare metal servers, on-prem. Your deployment choices are quite vast. So if you overlay the Couchbase Mobile stack on top of the edge computing topology that we looked at a few slides ago, this is where it fits in. So drawing your attention to the edge devices tier at the bottom, you've got Couchbase Lite, which can now be embedded within devices that can support it. Well, if you're talking about, so any device that is capable of running a full-fledged operating system is fair game as far as Couchbase Lite goes. So if you're talking about extremely resource-constrained sensors, Couchbase Lite cannot be deployed on those at this point. Then you've got Couchbase Server, the distributed database. It can be deployed in the edge nodes. It can be deployed in the central cloud servers. This is where data storage, data processing happens. So what about data movement? That's Sync Gateway. Sync Gateway is co-located and deployed along with Couchbase Server at each of the edge nodes, as well as in the central cloud data center. The Sync Gateway handles secure data synchronization between the edge device tier and between Couchbase Server in the edge node tier. And of course, you also have inter-sync gateway replication. So you can sync data between the hierarchy of data centers. And this hierarchy can be several tiers deep. This example, again, to demonstrate the concept, shows one tier. Also, I don't know if you caught that, but if you were to look closely, we also have sync directly between Couchbase Lite clients. So we support peer-to-peer sync directly between Couchbase Lite clients, and this can happen without the need for a central cloud-based control point. So if you have to summarize what I just talked about, Couchbase Mobile includes the embedded database, that's Couchbase Lite, and it includes secure data synchronization facilitated by the Sync Gateway. So in the rest of my presentation today, I'm going to be talking about Couchbase Mobile. So I'll be focusing on Couchbase Lite and the Sync Gateway products. So essentially, these are the two products that are taking the power of NoSQL data platform from Couchbase Server all the way to the edge. That said, a quick reminder, we've been doing all this for a very long time, right? I mean, the mobile applications have been out for a while. And so since 2014, so it's not something new. As we just heard, we launched 3.0. So we kind of we know what it takes to build an offline first experience. Of course, over the years, as I described, the paradigm of edge computing has gained a lot of traction just by virtue of the kinds of use cases that it enables, because you've got this influx of IoT applications and massive data intensive applications, right? Data is generated and consumed in large volumes at the edge. Now, if you're also new to the NoSQL world, or if you've been using a relational database within your mobile application, and if you're wondering why JSON? Well, first and foremost, JSON is arguably the de facto data exchange format on the internet. So if you're building a mobile application today, chances are you are consuming one or more web services which is delivering content in JSON format. So what this really means is, like, your platform is going to natively support some sort of JSON encoder, decoder, or serializer, deserializer. And if you're working with any modern programming languages, you're probably dealing with objects. Now, if you have to map the object-oriented paradigm into a relational schema, there is going to be an impedance mismatch. In fact, there's going to be this massive growth of tables, because you need some way of representing nested objects and arrays. Wouldn't it just be nice if you can think objects and store data in JSON, again, which maps very well to the object-oriented paradigm? So you're avoiding this sort of impedance mismatch and the need for having to translate using some sort of an ORM from the object world into the relational world. The last one, and probably one of the more compelling arguments, is JSON, it's a NoSQL database, right? And what we mean is your data is not bound by a strict data model. So this means your application can work with semi-structured, unstructured data. That's great. A lot of the applications that are built around are consuming and generating data, which is not very structured. Also, when you're talking about mobile applications, you're making new releases of the applications every month, for instance, and they are backed by some data. And what if that data model is evolving with every release of that application? Well, if your application, if you launch a new version of your application and you upgrade, users upgrade your existing version of the application to the new version or the latest version, and they try to open up a database corresponding to the old data model, you're probably going to see an error similar to this, depending on the platform on which they are attempting to open the application. So what are their options? Well, the naive approach is, well, ask your users to just delete the app and do a fresh install. That way, your latest version of the application is going to launch with the latest schema of the database, and everything is good. Well, that's terrible. You don't want that. It sort of defeats the whole purpose of having an embedded database if you're asking them to just get rid of all their local data and start from scratch. So typically the way this is handled is data migrations, right? Data model migrations or data schema migrations. Here's a quick example. Anytime you're looking at very simple changes to the data model, right? I admit there are automatic data migration capabilities available. But when you're talking about production applications, you're not talking about simple data migrations. Most of the time, the schema changes are quite disruptive in nature. You might have to change the type, you have to split a column into multiple columns, or you have to rename a key as your app evolves, or a column name as your app evolves. Well, if you have to do any sort of have to take care of disruptive changes, have to deal with migrations of that nature, it can get very complicated. And if you got multiple rollouts, multiple versions of your application, then imagine the time that it would take to do this sort of iterative data migration. Again, goes back to one of the original pain point, user experience. If your app is taking too long to launch because now it's really doing a data migration, well, then you end up with the same problem that we started off with. Users are probably going to uninstall your app. And if you're thinking, well, got to be a better way, and there is, and that's Couchbase Lite. It is a full-featured JSON NoSQL document database. Because it's a database, it is a full-featured database. So it obviously has data storage and querying functionality. Now, if you're coming from a relational world, or if you've worked with any sort of relational database like SQLite, then you're probably familiar with SQL as your query language. So Couchbase Lite supports SQL++. So SQL++ is essentially SQL for JSON. So there's no need as an application developer for you to learn a new query language or programming paradigm. Couchbase Lite also supports full text search queries. It's not just a standalone database. Of course, you can use Couchbase Lite as a standalone database, right? As a replacement for SQLite or Core Data, for example. But the key value proposition is that it's an offline first database. So it's capable of doing sync. Whenever there's network connectivity, you can sync data back to the cloud through the sync gateway. Or as I mentioned, you can also directly sync data over the LAN or the local network with other peers. When you talk about asynchronous events, we're talking about applications that are reactive in nature. You want to build applications where you don't want to have the application have to constantly poll the underlying database for, well, is there a change for me? Is there a change for me? You don't want that. So instead, if there is a change that is of interest to the application, you want the application to be automatically notified of those events. And in Couchbase Lite, you can do that. You've got granularity at different levels, at a database level, individual document level, sync-related events, or live queries. This is really interesting. So if your application, a UI or a view, is backed by a query, you can attach an observer to that query. So the application will be notified anytime the underlying database changes that affects the result set of that query. And then, of course, security. We talked about that as being really important when it comes to mobile applications. So database can be optionally encrypted at rest within Couchbase Lite. And of course, anytime data is synchronized to the backend systems or to other pure Couchbase Lite devices, it's all over a secure TLS connection. Now, in terms of the native support for platforms, it's pretty comprehensive. We have Swift and Objective-C for if you're building applications for iOS and macOS. If you're building applications for Android, we're supporting Kotlin and Java. Kotlin is something we just launched with 3.0. Pretty excited about that. So you no longer have to build applications for Android that has to rely on sort of this clunky Java to Kotlin bridging. So you can build truly idiomatic Kotlin applications on Android. And earlier you heard about Java support. So it's not just Couchbase Lite is not just a database, embedded database for mobile applications, right? I mean, we also support desktop applications, and we do that through Java and .NET. We already have that on our playground. You can try that out. And very soon we're going to support .NET on the playground as well. Xamarin, I'm going to talk about C in a second, but Xamarin, of course, if you're building applications in C#, allows you to write cross-platform applications for iOS and Android using C#. I have a slide dedicated to C because it is that important. This is a release-defining feature in 3.0. And here's why. It's just more than a platform bindings layer. And the reason for that is multifold. So first is multi-language support. You can easily build, because it is a sort of a lingua franca of programming languages, you can easily build language bindings for any language, programming language of your choice, very easily on top of the C API. So which means you can now embed Couchbase Lite for C in any application written in a broad range of programming languages. It can be Python or Dart or JavaScript, Go, take your pick. You just need to write the bindings layer. And that's quite easy using things like FFI. Then when it comes to embedded programming, well, C remains the #1 programming languages or language of choice. So if you are doing any sort of embedded programming, building an application for a custom embedded hardware, anything that's capable of running a full operating system, think Raspberry Pi, you can embed Couchbase Lite within that. You can, of course, also embed that within your own custom embedded hardware. Now, the C platform is supported across mobile, desktop, and custom embedded hardware. So you can truly build cross-platform applications that run across mobile and desktop platforms. So for example, Flutter. You can build Flutter applications using a Dart plugin that uses the Dart FFI to bind to the underlying C API. And we have proof of that. We have a partnership with a community developer who's built a plugin in Dart and Flutter. So you can now build applications in Flutter using Couchbase Lite. And I'm sure we can put the link in the resources section. Now, I'm sure as curious developers, you want to know a little bit of what happens under the hood, right? So as an application developer, you would link your application with Couchbase Lite framework. So Couchbase Lite is distributed. You can just directly download, but depending on the platform, you use appropriate distribution mechanisms, whether it's Maven or NuGet or Swift Package Manager. So from an application standpoint, the application will interface with a native API layer. This is the layer that's written in the language that's native to the platform. So for example, on Android, it could be Kotlin or Java. On Windows, it'd be C#. Now, there is a very thin platform bindings layer, which is an implementation of the native API layer. This layer interfaces with our Lite core engine. So think of the Lite core engine as the brain of Couchbase Lite. It's a C++ highly performant engine. It's shared across all our Couchbase Lite platforms, which is the reason we are able to innovate and bring feature parity across the entire spectrum of Couchbase Lite platforms. So the engine handles the core storage functionality, query, as well as data synchronization. From an application standpoint, you're going to be dealing with data in JSON format. There is no ORM, there's no ODM, there's no mapping of the objects to any relational world. That data is binary encoded and stored in a highly efficient format. So it's efficient, it's optimized both in terms of data storage as well as memory utilization when it comes to queries and joins and such. So as I mentioned, from an application developer standpoint, you'll be interfacing with the native API layer. And what kind of functionality is exposed by the layer? Well, of course, it's a database. So you're going to have core database management functions. You should be able to create, read, update, and delete documents, queries, replicator, which handles the data sync, and of course, observers, which allows applications to be asynchronously notified of various events. A few slides ago, you saw an overview of all the platforms that are natively supported by Couchbase Lite. Also talked about the Flutter.plugin that's available through our community developer. But what about the other native platforms like Ionic, JavaScript platforms, based platforms like Ionic, Cordova, native, React Native, etc. So for those platforms, typically one would have to build a native bridging plugin that bridges the native API layer over to the JavaScript world. So most of these platforms offer they are pretty prescriptive in terms of how one would expose native functionality into JavaScript. So you would just have to build these plugins, and we continue to make it really simple in terms of our APIs. So it's easy to build these plugins. That said, we do have a partnership with Ionic, and there is an Ionic Enterprise plugin that is available. And we have a session on this a week from now. So check that out. So that was sort of a whirlwind tour of Couchbase Lite, but hopefully you have a sense of what the platform has to offer. So that's all about data storage and processing. And now let's talk about the data sync component, which is the sync gateway. So what are the main functions of the sync gateway? Well, data sync. So it's all about synchronizing data to Couchbase Lite clients, and it's also about synchronizing data with other sync gateway clusters. We also support Delta Sync, which is, so by default, data sync is at the granularity of a document. But Delta Sync allows you to synchronize data at the granularity of a field. So even if you have a large document, but just a few bytes of that document have changed, a few hundred bytes of that document have changed, rather than synchronizing the entire document, Couchbase Mobile takes care of synchronizing just the parts of that document that have changed. So as an application developer, you don't have to do anything special to enable this. It's a config option. You opt in, and we'll take care of the rest. Conflict resolution, something overlooked by a lot of users, but extremely important when we are talking about a distributed computing paradigm, right? Where you have multiple users who are concurrently accessing the platform and making changes to the same data set at the same time. You're going to have conflicts. How do you choose the winner? Sync Gateway has built-in automatic conflict resolution. So if you've never thought about it, don't worry, we have you covered, right? We've got automatic conflict resolution. But what if you want to be in control over how those data conflicts are handled? We offer that as well. Access control, so you can control access at a document level for reads and at a field level for writes. I talked about data sync, but Sync Gateway also supports a RESTful interface. So you can write browser web clients that can directly interface with the Sync Gateway through a public REST interface. All the administration of the Sync Gateway is handled, database administration of the Sync Gateway is handled through an admin REST endpoint. And we also have a dedicated metrics endpoint that allows you to integrate third-party monitoring systems like Prometheus to monitor the Sync Gateway. I spoke about security. Everything is encrypted over TLS end-to-end. In terms of platform support, in fact, this is same as what we support on Couchbase Server as well. But on Sync Gateway, all the major operating systems, public cloud providers, and it can be containerized. So it makes it very easy if you want to quickly get this up and running on your local dev environment. And then move it over to your staging and subsequently to your production environment. You can use orchestration technologies like Kubernetes for doing that. Now, if you're a little curious about really what does one have to do to get started with Sync Gateway, it's pretty straightforward. The Sync Gateway has to first be bootstrapped to the Couchbase server. So as I mentioned, Sync Gateway and Couchbase server, they're always co-located in the same data center. So you have to connect Sync Gateway to a backend Couchbase server. And then you have to start configuring the Sync Gateway. Once the Sync Gateway node itself is up and running, you go into the Sync Gateway, rather you start configuring the Sync Gateway. The first thing you have to do is configure the Sync Gateway endpoint to which all the clients will start replicating. Right, and this would be giving it a unique name, the backing bucket. So in Couchbase server lingo, a bucket is analogous to what you might know as a database from a relational world. So you can configure your database, then you configure your access control, who has access to what subset of data, your authenticate, then finally your authentication mechanism. Right? How are users going to register with your system? How are they going to be authenticated with your system? So in Sync Gateway, the bootstrap configuration is handled through a JSON, very simple JSON config file, just a few lines long. You provide that to Sync Gateway on startup. And all the other stuff that's depicted in red over here is through the secure admin REST endpoint. And that's really important because if you have to think about an edge computing topology, right? And I talked about the fact that you can distribute and deploy Sync Gateway in a cloud data center or any of the edge nodes. Well, if you have that distributed architecture, you need to have an easy way of administering and configuring your Sync Gateway regardless of where it's deployed. You don't want to have to SSH into your Sync Gateway, muck around with the configuration, right? And so a RESTful interface that's secure, authenticated and authorized will facilitate that. Now, this is just a high-level cheat sheet, really, of the replication technology. It WebSockets based. You have full control from an application developer standpoint. You have full control over how you configure the sync replicator. You can have unidirectional sync, bidirectional. You can have continuous sync, in which case changes are synchronized in real time, or it's one shot or on demand. So application decide when they want to sync the data. Both of them can coexist within an application. I talked about Delta Sync, fine-grained filtering at the level of a document. So you can actually decide which document you want to sync. And also based on any criteria, any of the properties within the document. And then I also mentioned automatic and custom conflict resolution support. So if you don't want to take care of conflicts, no worries. We'll take care of that using a predefined set of heuristics. But if those heuristics don't work for your application, use custom conflict resolution. The same thing extends to inter-sync gateway replication as well. It's scalable, but it's between distributed sync gateway clusters. So that was a quick overview of Couchbase Lite and Sync Gateway products. So I want to share a few code snippets. There's going to be a demo later, but want to share some quick code snippets to give you a glimpse from an application developer standpoint, what really it takes to integrate with one of our native APIs. So in fact, through the code snippets, I've used different languages interchangeably. And so regardless of your programming language background, I'm hoping that The snippets are self-explanatory and really simple, and you can follow through. So you can, to create a database, you create a database configuration object. That's optional. Optionally, you can specify the encryption key. Of course, if you want to have your database encrypted, you specify the encryption key. So you can give a password, in which case we use 64,000 rounds of PBKDF2 algorithm to generate the hash key, which is used for encrypting the database. And then to create a database, you just give it a name and give this configuration. There are other configuration options as well, but they're all optional. Something very unique to Couchbase Lite applications is you can pre-bundle your application with a Couchbase Lite database. So it's essentially a file. You would link bundle that file, database file, with Couchbase Lite application. And this is very commonly used if your application is dealing with a lot of static sort of public data. You obviously can't bundle or pre-bundle user-specific data or private information, but then anything that's public information, like public assets, just public records, you can bundle that. And when application launches, it's just going to open up that database, copy it over, and use that. So this is, again, goes back to the initial, especially useful for initial startup. So rather than the application on initial launch pull like massive volumes of data from some remote server, you can give the perception of responsiveness by quickly loading the application with the data that's locally present. And then in the background, you can sync the data with the remote servers. Won't go into all the details. The highlighted text here is what I want to draw your attention to. It's very simple. To create a document, you create a document and use a database save. You can update the document. You do a get document on the document ID, get the document. Everything is immutable in general. All the objects are immutable. That's keeps it relatively thread safe. So in order to actually mutate something, you have to get a mutable copy of that particular object and edit it and then save it. Read, you can get a document. We have a number of transformers available. Like in this example, we've got a toJSON, so it transforms that to a JSON string. This is something that we introduced in 3.0. But then we also have transformers that transform it to any native native data types, like maps and dictionaries. And of course, you can delete a document. You can also set TTL to a document. This is just scratching the surface, really, in terms of what you can do. There's like hundreds of APIs that are available that allows you to build like pretty complex workflows. Query. The box on top is a simple example of a SQL++ query. So if you read that query, that's a hello world query, literally a hello world query. It should seem very familiar to you if you have done anything with databases or relational databases. Below, in addition to regular querying capabilities, we also support full text search queries. So you can search for arbitrary text in your document. We have support for stemming, order, rank order, language support. And for full text search, you have to create an index. And once you create an index, you can use a match function for really detecting a match with the keyword against the document. And finally, sync. It's really, really simple. We take care of all the hard work, right? So if you have to set up a sync, the least you'll have to do is create a replication object, specify the local database, because again, within your application, you can have as many instances of Couchbase Lite as your application needs. Although it's in practical, most practical cases, you just have one or two, but then in theory, you can have as many as you want. But you provide a local database, the remote target endpoint, and then you have to actually configure replicator with the configuration. There's a line missing there, and then you start the replication. But you can actually have more options. Sorry, let's go back here. That's the minimal. But if you want to have more control over your replication configuration, you can do that. You can set all those options that I talked about when it comes to continuous mode, the directionality, the authentication mechanism and so on, all of that stuff, you can configure that and you can override the defaults. You can also attach a listener, so you can get notified as an application. You can get notified of events. So quickly summarize things up. I took a lot of pains putting this animation together. Hopefully it comes through okay. So what are the main requirements? When you're dealing with mobile platforms, desktop platforms, you're dealing with a plethora of device types. You want these devices you want offline support. So these applications can be used in truly offline scenarios, even when there is no network connectivity. Well, there is no internet connectivity, but maybe there is local area connectivity, right? You have a construction site or you are in an offshore oil rig. In that case, I want the application to be able to talk to each other. I want all the users to be able to communicate with each other directly. Well, if there is internet available, I want all that data to be synced to a backend system for long-term persistent and analysis. Talked about conflicts, right? If I have multiple concurrent users and they are changing the same data at the same time, how do you pick a winning revision? And then when you're talking about anytime you're talking about mobile applications, you're talking about scale. Last but not least, of course, security. And how does Couchbase Mobile fit the bill? Well, Couchbase Lite, embedded database, number of platforms that it's supported on. It's offline first, and we also have support for peer-to-peer sync. The WebSockets-based replication protocol allow data sync between the Couchbase Lite-enabled applications through the sync gateway to Couchbase server. Replication protocol also takes care of data conflicts. And then, of course, when you're talking about scale, because it's a NoSQL database, distributed database, you can scale up, but you can also scale horizontally. And it's extremely easy to scale out the platform to handle any influx of data or load. And of course, everything is secured end-to-end, encryption of data at rest, encryption of data in transit, authentication, and authorization. And with that, thank you. Thanks for listening. And yeah,
it's really exciting, right? I mean, there's just so many cool things about Couchbase Lite and Couchbase Mobile and 3.0. I mean, one of the things I just want to quickly highlight, and we do have a couple questions to chat too. So one, the chat is from Brian. This is a really good question. Of course, we get it from time to time. You know, the sync gateway understands scopes and collections, and so just for some people on the stream that don't understand what these words mean, those are features that were introduced in Couchbase Server 7. And so they're brand new features. Now, one of the misconceptions is people think, oh, okay, well, you know, if this doesn't work, can I use Couchbase 7? That's wrong. And I hear that all the time and I see on the forum. So mobile, let me just say right now, Couchbase Mobile and Couchbase Server 7 work perfectly fine together. I use it every day. It is a great situation. But Priya, do you want to kind of give people some background of like the more complicated answer to this question?
You gave a very accurate answer, Aaron. Thanks for that. But so I'll just so yes, again, and the way it works is because there is this concept of default scopes and collections, right? Yeah. And so that's what makes Couchbase Mobile interoperate and be compatible with Couchbase Server. So and every Couchbase bucket will have a default scope. You know, it's something you can't get rid of. That's always going to exist. So it's only when it comes to user-defined collections, and that's something that we are exploring on Couchbase Mobile. Obviously, we want to support Couchbase scopes and collections even within the context of Couchbase Mobile, and that's something which is very much on our radar. And would also like to add that just because your bucket, Couchbase Server bucket, has, say, some user-defined scopes and collections, doesn't mean you can't use Couchbase Mobile. It's just that, you know, you would attach your sync gateway to the default scope and collections, and you can continue to use the user-defined scopes and collections for any server-related applications that don't have to be synced to a mobile. So something, I want to call out.
And there's all kinds of tricks that people have done with eventing and stuff. I don't want to get into on the call. There's so many ways around this, right? Just want to let you know that it is support. Technically speaking, Couchbase Server 7 does work in mobile. Doesn't support those, like you said, those user-defined scopes and collections yet. With the keyword yet. And the future is bright. That's all I want to say on that, right? The future is always bright. Things are always changing. Come talk to us in the future, and things will change. But one of the things I do want to highlight, and it's so critical, is the C API. Now, most people don't know this, but I have a very long career of being in the consultant industry and stuff, and I wrote a lot of embedded stuff. This, for example, and I know I have chroma key on, so you're seeing some weird stuff, but this is an NVIDIA Tegra board. This is really important because this was one of the original boards that Tesla used in the first generation of their cars. This runs Couchbase Lite now without problems. I'm not kidding. You could load Couchbase Lite on here. I have a Couchbase Lite database on here. Works great. This is the next generation of embedded devices. So this is a custom board. This is the NVIDIA. It's called Jetson. And if you're an embedded developer, you know what this is. It's got GPIO headers for complicated sensors and stuff. This also runs a Couchbase Lite database. But the cool thing is that if you're getting into this, or you just are a hobbyist and stuff, here's a Raspberry Pi. Raspberry Pi 4 GPIO headers. You can throw your sensors on there. This can run Couchbase Lite. Really, Couchbase Lite 3.0, in my opinion, is so critical because it runs everywhere now. Now that you have this, you can, with C library, all these things are possible now. The things that you can do now are just insanely crazy awesome. It's amazing to see this kind of support. And I think that this is going to be like the next gen of things that we're going to start to see now. Things like, you think that, well, why would you need this, Aaron? Why would you need this? Think about it like this. Think about what happens if you're at a fast food restaurant and they leave the refrigerator open and all the food spoils, right? So there's sensors that they basically need to do and monitor how long is this fridge open, because they're trying to make sure that things don't unthaw out, right? There's all these little weird things, these edge cases for sensors and IoT that you don't think of that businesses have. And they're trying to collect that data and they're trying to make sure they understand energy improvements and all these kind of things. Work on so many of these types of things. And that's where this database and having it there and be able to sync on the fly. And then also the security, which I know you talked about a little bit. All those things I think is where it just is so critically cool as a platform to come into it and be able to use all these really cool APIs.
Yeah, thanks for the call out on that security, because that's important. Because on C, I didn't mention, in addition to database encryption, we also have field level.
Correct. I was going to get into that to say, I mean, you just don't understand like how critical that was. Field level encryption and database encryption. This is stuff that your big financial companies, and they have all these InfoSec requirements and all these regulations about certain data has to be encrypted and stuff. This is like a whole nother level playing field that we're talking about here, and nobody else is doing it like we do it. I promise you. I've used so many other platforms. I'm just here to say this is like bleeding edge stuff that's super cool to see coming on all this different hardware. It's really, really neat. Now I know that we have Daniel with us, and Daniel, I believe that you also have like a cool demo that you want to show off, right?
Yeah. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Priya, for that. That was great. Yeah, I mean, speaking of IoT, I mean, I've got some folks out there on farms right now that are using these sensors to to detect animal movements and things like that. It's crazy.
You say that? I literally about 3 years ago did a POC where we took thermodynamics from a drone and we would calculate how much corn was left in a silo, because we know the heat signature of corn, and we could calculate that. We could throw that into a database and calculate that in real time. So you're looking for like the crop movement and stuff. All this stuff is real. This is like the future that we have here. And people don't understand how important that is. So that the farmer knows every day, okay, I have this much grain left in here, right? I know, like, automatically order more if they're not growing it themselves, or if they're trying to figure out like shipping dynamics and stuff. All those things are now automated and possible because of that. We have all this IoT data and this data and these embedded databases that can automatically sync all this stuff for statistics. So, but
yeah, a lot of times these farms we are talking about are also off the radar, off the grid, right? They don't have connections. So
absolutely, the silos in the middle of a field.
Yes.
So they may have like a little tiny edge data modem that they can maybe get like 2 or 3G off of, that they sync once a day or something like that.
Yeah, that peer-to-peer sync I think is critical in these operations. You know, and I, before joining Couchbase a couple of years ago, I was working in the telecom industry as a developer. So for me as a developer, when I started playing with Couchbase Lite, Couchbase Mobile, it just got me super excited, and I love talking about it. and I love sort of showing off. So, Priya had mentioned, you had talked about some pretty complicated use cases out there.
Yeah.
And if you're watching this video right now, you're probably a developer, or if you are a developer, then you know the cool stuff you can write with code. But kind of what I want to do today is sort of just not show how complicated you can make it, but how easy it is to do this. So, before I jump in and show you some code, I just kind of want to set the stage, maybe sort of, Priya, you would also mention using Docker to set up a development environment, which is kind of exactly what I'm here, doing here with my code. So that's kind of what I want to show off just a little bit first, and then we'll get into, taking a look at the application and the code itself.
Sounds wonderful. Let's go ahead and do that then. So I'm going to jump off the stream here. We'll get you on here, and then we'll get you so that you can go ahead and do that. Go ahead, Natasha, if you want to go ahead and get it screen up. Excellent. I'm going to bow out, and looking forward to seeing what you got.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you so much. Okay, so first of all, setting up a development environment in Docker on your local machine is just a perfect way to run Couchbase. It's very lightweight. It's portable, right? You can be working on code in an airplane, if you want to. And so that's kind of what I'm doing here. So the first step for me in creating this sort of environment where I've got two containers, I've got a single node Couchbase server instance running into one Docker container. I've got another container running Sync Gateway. So the first step that I took was to create a virtual network inside of Docker to sort of bridge these two together. So that's what I've done in the first step. Then it's pretty easy to fire up a container running a single node of Couchbase. That's the next step. You can then go into the console and set everything up just as you would normally do. But what I've done is skipped ahead here a little bit. What I've done is I've set up I've run some curl commands basically to set this thing up for me. So this is really quick, and it's a great way to do quick deployment. So first thing, setting up the services that I wanted to run in this environment. At the heart of Couchbase is the key value, so that's got to be running at least on one of the nodes. I've also added index and query, which is required by the Couchbase Sync Gateway, and then I also added full text search, which I'm not using. Creating memory quotas, things like that. Creating a bucket for this to run in. The next step is Sync Gateway requires a user on the Couchbase server to connect to. So in this case, I'm creating a user called Sync Gateway. You can kind of see it over here. This is the name of the user that you're creating. And then, of course, it has to have access to a bucket, which has already been created. So that's on the Couchbase side. The next step is to create a Sync Gateway container. And I've done that here, and I've mapped a local drive so that I can connect this Sync Gateway configuration. And that's what Priya was talking about with that bootstrapping, where the next steps beyond that are configured using the curl, the RESTful APIs. So this is as simple as it gets. Creating a bootstrap to the server. So in this case, cv_sg is simply the name of the Docker container. Now, because I'm doing this for a demo and I'm using it as a development, I've just gone ahead and skipped the whole certificate process and encryption. Obviously, you don't want to do this in production. Very, very bad. And then the next step, lastly, is this is the Sync Gateway user that I created on the Couchbase server, along with the super secret password that you see there. Once that Sync Gateway container is up and running, then you need to add the Sync Gateway database, and that's that demo bucket there again. Interesting here, this encrypted password here, what this is simply a base 64 encoding of the username and password that is, to connect to the cluster itself. So that's really all there is to setting that up. Super simple. I've scripted this. It takes about 2 minutes to create the Couchbase server and the Sync Gateway instance. So let's go ahead and get out of here, and we'll move right into the demo. So here I've got a simple application that I've created, and here is the Couchbase cluster that I put together. So what's going on here is I've just, just to sort of demonstrate how simple this is, let's go ahead and I want to create another instance here. So this is, on the iPad app here, we're just replicating everything that you see here in the Couchbase server environment. So if I go ahead and create a user here, another contact in here, I'm going to create Daffy Duck. Let's say his email is your despicable. This is just a free form field, so it doesn't really matter how bad my spelling is. And then we'll just put in 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. When I add a contact, it goes right into the database, and if I hit retrieve over here, you're going to see it immediately show up right in here. So super quick. Again, this is running just in a container, a couple of containers on my machine. I can show in here if I change this backward, I say, well, the phone number is actually 4321 when I hit save. If you look at that second line over here in the app, it immediately updated right there in the app as well. And now if I go into Xcode, just so you can sort of see kind of what's going on behind the scenes here, I'm just outputting basic information about what's going on in the replication. And I'll show you how that's done. But this code is so simple. There's one last thing I kind of want to show here. Let me just feed this thing a whole bunch of data. Let me hide Xcode real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dump just a whole bunch of data right here into the database, 500 more records. So almost instantaneously, those things are automatically replicated super quickly right back into the app through the sync gateway. If I look at Xcode again, you're going to see all of that stuff right out here logged. And then again, too, lastly, let me go ahead and delete these guys here. Boom. Almost immediately deleted right out of the application. So if you were to write this code yourself, imagine how many lines of code it would take to set up that replication process, to set up the fact that this would handle offline capability, right? If internet connectivity is lost, but you're still making changes on one side or the other, it's going to pick up those changes. It's going to handle the Delta sync. It's going to handle the conflict resolution, all of that stuff. Imagine how many lines of code that would take. Well, it really doesn't take up very much here. As Priya sort of showed in her code samples earlier, basically you set up a target to that sync gateway through a port to a bucket, and these things are all sort of stored over here in these static values over here. You make an endpoint out of that, and then you set up your replication. And it was mentioned earlier that replication can be one way, it can be two way. So it can be unidirectional or single directional, or sorry, bidirectional. So if I set that up, I can say it's a push and pull, it's a pull, or it's a push. And again, I'm setting up continuous replication so that any mutation on either side of the fence there is going to immediately trigger this replication, but you can create an on-demand. You can say, I don't want it continuous replication. I want some other event in my application to trigger a replication. And that's really about all you have to do. Then you create the replicator object. And then the last step down here is to start the replication. Now that's all it takes to set up that replication. But probably you're going to want to set up listeners to respond to mutation events. And that's exactly what you saw in the log output over there. So here is a replication listener that anytime there's a mutation, you can trigger a response to that mutation in your code. So super flexible, super easy to set up. Again, this is a simple example, but as a developer, you can make some pretty complicated things happen based on certain mutations. So that's really, all I wanted to show.
Yeah, it's very cool. And it brings up a great example. A lot of times, new developers that are new to mobile and stuff, a lot of times they get caught up on how complicated it can be without something like this. I'll give you the examples I always talk about is like Facebook and Twitter. If you think about it, if you have those apps, they're social media, right? But anytime there's new tweets, if you go to the top of Twitter, it says 13 new tweets, and you click the button and it loads that data. Without an embedded database that does this, that's really hard. That's really hard. You're either doing polling or some other technology to figure out when that data comes down. But with Couchbase Lite, that's just built in. There's no work to doing that whatsoever. And if you use a framework like Combine, which is like Apple's kind of its new reactive framework, you literally can map these delegate methods into that. And when you do that, it makes it so that UI is almost instant, and you write 10 lines of code at most to do that. That's where it blows my mind. And of course, over in Android, we do support things like flows in Kotlin, so you could get the same experience over there using live data and view models. So the cool thing is that Couchbase Lite plays really well, as you showed, but it also plays really well with those embedded frameworks you're used to using in these mobile applications to make your data super dynamic without writing all the crappy code it normally takes to try to make that experience happen, right? I mean, you've done it before too, probably, like just detecting if the network's available, how complicated that can get. I'm going, oh no, the network's not available. I have to have the reactive framework or this framework in order to figure that out. And then I have to do this and this,
For sure. I mean, we've got the same thing here, right? It's a simple listener to respond to changes in the sync gateway status, whether it's busy doing something, not busy doing something.
Yeah.
It's been lost. Your application can immediately respond to sync gateways become unavailable because my network's down.
Yeah, it's so amazing just to see how quickly you could build like these really, really what looks like $1 million mobile apps with Couchbase Lite because of the fact that so much of the stuff is just built in. And you don't have to build in all this complicated things to try to detect and try to decide what to do and stuff. Because it's just super easy, like you said with events. Boom, there. The live queries, my favorite feature. It's just so amazing to see those in action. So this demo is pretty awesome. Now, Daniel, is there a GitHub repo that they can go see this code in? If people watching,
there is actually. I didn't think to get that right away. If you'd like me to pull that up, give me just one second. I can.
Sure, absolutely, that'd be great. And then we'll put it also in the video on demand afterwards. So like if you're on YouTube, we'll have it in the notes down there where to get the repo for this at. So I mean, it's a really cool example. I like sample code as a developer, right? Anytime I can look to see how somebody else built something, that's how I learn. So that's a really cool thing to have out here for that. This is amazing. Let's see here. Do we have any other questions that are kind of coming in here? It looks like we're kind of okay. I want to bring Priya on just for a couple more questions real quick here. And maybe the three of us can figure this out because we get a lot of these questions there. So one of the questions we get, Priya, is on like the confusion of multiple versions of Couchbase Lite. So can maybe you explain to us like a little bit more about the licensing and how that works?
Okay. Yeah, sure. So we've got a community edition, which you can see, and then we've got an enterprise edition EE. There's like 80% feature parity. The only difference is it's not so much functional. There'll be some enhancements on performance and scalability and things of that nature because the idea being EE is going to be used in larger enterprise grade applications and such. But both those licenses allow developers to download and try both CE and EE for free, unlimited, for free for dev and test. Of course, CE can be moved into production. I mean, it's a community version, it's free. But then let's say you're using, like the Delta Sync is an example of an enhancement that's CE only. And if you want to use Delta Sync, because again, we envision that's, business critical, large scale applications, then you can, when you're ready, you've tested it out, dev test, you're satisfied, you think you want to take this to production, then you get a license from us. So that's sort of the main thing, but we don't restrict developers from downloading and trying EE and getting the full experience of all that Couchbase has to offer.
Okay, so basically, if I'm building my recipe app for my grandma and I just want to go ahead and try out EE, I could do that, and no police are going to come in and put me in handcuffs, right?
Yes,
that's what you're getting at?
Exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's
Go ahead. Yes.
Okay, cool. And that's kind of important, right? Because there is some of these features in enterprise that are special for like industries that have you mentioned it before, healthcare and stuff, where the basically the encrypted data, the field of encryption in the C library is super huge. Those kind of features, we want you to get out there and use those and see them in action to really prove that the value is there. I truly believe it's there. I mean, just encrypting a database alone means that today, if you want to try to do data encryption, it's really complicated, especially in Android, right? You have to get some kind of MDM platform, and that's really hard, and all these other things. With this, it's one line of code. Yeah. It's like, what? I mean, that's crazy amazing. So they have that available and stuff as a feature. I think that's really great. And so people just have a good understanding of that. We have a lot more information on our website, of course. And you can anytime ping me or Priya on the internet. We'll be more than happy to answer those kind of future questions. Priya is definitely knows more about licensing than me. I'm just the developer that writes code. So another thing we have here is, when we look at the Couchbase library and stuff, and a lot of people, especially in mobile, it's all about being thin, right? Because every ounce of CPU you're using could take away from battery life. So a lot of times we get from the community questions about like just how big is the library and just how efficient is it and stuff. So maybe you or Daniel can answer some questions about that.
Sure, I can take that. So it depends, varies by platform, but it's anywhere between 2 to 5 megabytes. That's it. That's the size of the library. So it's really minuscule. After that, so the library itself is very lightweight, which is why it, you can actually deploy it in embedded devices as well, and very resource constrained devices. And then beyond that, it really, how much space your application takes is just depends on your application, right? I mean, if you got like gigabytes of data that you're storing locally, we put no hard limits on Couchbase Lite in terms of how big your database grows. But well, that's going to be the size of your application and how much data it's using up on your user's phone. But then the library itself is pretty lightweight.
So pro tip is, if you have a big document that has 200 fields in it, we have query, right? Limit the fields that you want to put on the screen versus bring the whole document into memory, because that's obviously a big waste. That's the advantage of having query, right? Because in query, I can say, hey, even though I have like 5 nested arrays in here, I really only need the person's first name, last name, and address for this particular screen. Well, then don't bring the whole document back. Just bring the data you need to make the application work, right?
Yeah, and it reminded me of one thing which I kind of glossed over. I talked about data governance, sovereignty somewhere up front, right? And that really has to do with data retention. So, well, if you're like, well, if you've got tons of data and your local database is growing, once you sync up the data, purge it from your local database if your application no longer needs it, right? I mean, your app is running for 6 months, 1 year, and the database is growing. Well, if the data is gone up, it's synced, no reason for you to locally persist unless there is a reason you can choose to persist, but you have full control over just setting a TTL. We saw that code snippet, setting a TTL, or just on demand purging that. So from an application developer standpoint, you have full control over the retention policies on your data. And I think that's important to just keep your application size and the data usage manageable. I don't know if Daniel, you worked on a lot of production deployments, if you had any pro tips to add.
Honestly, I think you covered the bulk of them. One thing I don't think we spoke about a whole lot was using channels to limit how much data gets actually delivered to the device, both for the purposes, if you have a couple terabytes of data in your Couchbase server, you're not going to stealth that onto an iOS device. So that's one reason, obviously, for resource constraints, but also for security to restrict what data that user on the device has access to.
And you could say the word channel. That really, I think, if we want to kind of convert it into words that maybe other people understand if they're not used to our naming architecture, is that it's really similar to like groups. Like if you have a group of people, you say this group of people can get access to this data. Some people use the word teams. It all means the same thing. When we talk about channels, it's really about just restricting who has access to documents, making sure just those documents go onto the device, right? Is that like a good summary of like what we're talking about?
Yeah, it's like I use the term tag. It's like a way to tag your document. So it's a tag. You can have as many, and the tag groups your document, like you said.
So that's cool. So I'll give you an example that I worked on. This is realistic, real world examples. I worked in the accounting space for accounting industry, and a lot of times they'll have audits. They'll go to these audits and only 3 people can see this data. It's financial data. They're going into a warehouse and trying to count different widgets and see how many of those have. It's very important, very critical financial data, but those 3 people should be able to see it because they're publicly traded companies. And that information could be used to harm their stock price, right? Sure. If they know that, hey, this warehouse has this many X widgets and they're announcing this new one that no one knows about, but it's in their warehouse. You don't want that information out, right? So that's the thing where Couchbase Lite really works well in that environment, where you can limit the amount of people that see that data. You're still syncing to the server. The application still works. So it's very, very cool. Well, folks, I have a very good treat for us here. We have a very good friend of Couchbase, one of the smartest people I know. Amarish, how you doing, bud? 1 second here. I think you're muted.
No, I'm doing good. I don't know.
I know that when it comes to deploying some stuff, you've got massive experience in Couchbase and Sync Gateway and stuff. And I've talked to you about this before. I saw your Connect talk on that you had, and it was awesome, completely amazing to kind of hear those experiences. And I know that you got some stuff to show us today, kind of go through that journey that you've been through and stuff.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, if you want, let's go ahead and get your screen up. And if you want, we'll give you the floor. So maybe you can share with people like what's going on and what you've learned from this experience.
All right. Thanks, Aaron.
Awesome.
So quickly, giving you a quick introduction of myself. I'm Amrish Raji. I work with Infosys. I'm a principal tech arc with Infosys. Have been here for 20 years, and I primarily, specialize in application modernization, legacy modernization kind of projects. Right now, I'm leading a major transformation project for a leading client where we are implementing Couchbase, mobile sync between handheld devices and the server. And that's quite a large project for the retail client where they're replacing all their legacy devices with Couch based solution. Um, Quite a few learnings from that project, quite a few features that we're using out of the box that Couchbase provides, and I kind of wanted to walk through some of the things that we got me excited about, and then you know we have a very strong relationship with Couchbase, a good partnership. As developers, we kind of want features, right, that we see missing in the product or lacking, and then we reach out to Couchbase, say, hey, this is something that would be really super important for us, or helpful for us or something. And we have seen Couchbase implement those features over a period of time, giving us more abilities to do what we want to do. um so that's what I'm going to kind of talk you through, the evolution of Couchbase Mobile, if you will, over the years that I have worked with it. Some of the key features that I have seen, uh, that have really helped us with our implementation of Couchbase and Sync. So again, this is not really going to be a presentation. I'm just going to try and talk through points here, but I'm just kind of showing you a list of things that I'm going to talk about. The first thing that I want to sort of talk about is when I started working with Couchbase Mobile. That was way back on version 2.1 or something. We didn't have something called Delta Sync, but then with version 2.5, Couchbase introduced Delta Sync. Priya sort of briefly touched upon Delta Sync, but then having Delta Sync was really, really useful for us. Now, in our retail client, we move megabytes of data between the server and each device, and we have like 25-30,000 devices. So bandwidth for us is very, very important. And generally speaking, let's say I'm moving information about a customer, right? So the customer core table, if you will, or customer core information, if you will, is in a JSON document. It's not like the whole document is changing every day, right? What changes within the document is, say, the customer's phone number changed or an address change or something. We're talking about a field that changes, a few KB of data that changes versus the whole document. And with Delta Sync, what Couchbase does is it looks at the previous revision of the document, sees, hey, only this field in the document changed, and I'm able to sync only that specific field over the wire. Saves a ton of bandwidth from a performance standpoint. Obviously, you're not syncing the whole document. It's pretty fast, works like a charm. It's something that has really helped us bring our bandwidth utilization down. Makes a lot of sense for us. Cache management, right? As a large enterprise customer, we have multiple sync gateways running. We don't want to keep scaling these sync gateways up, right? We want to make the most out of what we have in terms of hardware resources as well. Having the ability to manage how sync gateway caches some of this information. This is something that has been very helpful for us. Again, it was introduced around 2.6 version. We are actively using this in production. Makes a lot of sense for us. The other thing that I want to talk about, OIDC. So sync gateway, Priya talked about this briefly. It supports OIDC, right? So we use Okta in our case to manage all the users and credentials. And sync gateway fully supports that, right? One of the things that we're lacking is within our own implementation, we just did not have a way to specify certain properties like user claims, right? And that was sort of holding us back from fully utilizing OIDC, and we had to use, basic auth, if you will. We worked with Couchbase. Priya was able to help us get that feature added to Couchbase, Sync Gateway, right? And then we have this implemented in production now, where we are using OIDC, Okta tokens to exchange data. No basic auth, no session token management, nothing, right? Just a seamless user experience. User logs in, uses Okta to get their token, login. The same token is used just for syncing as well. There's nothing else that we need. So this is something that has helped us a lot. There was a metric REST API that was introduced recently, where you can get Prometheus-based data metrics from Sync Gateway. Again, this was something that we were waiting on. It was something that we wanted to be able to monitor the health of our Sync Gateways. And we extensively used Prometheus. So what we had to do previously was, have some custom scripts to get data from Couchbase using the older metric endpoint, and feed it to Prometheus and do some transformations. But with what they've done with the REST APIs, where you can get data in a Prometheus format, it just is seamless now to integrate Sync Gateway with our monitoring dashboards. So that has helped us a lot. Sync Gateway or Inter-Sync Gateway replication, that's another new feature that they introduced. So while with the 2.x versions of Couchbase, the communication between the Sync Gateways and the mobile clients shifted to using WebSockets, which was pretty fast to sync the data. The Sync Gateway, the replication between multiple Sync Gateways. So for example, you have two data centers between which you need to sync data. That was still using the older HTTP-based technology and wasn't that fast, if you will, to exchange data. So with the Inter-Sync Gateway replication now, even the Sync Gateway replication uses the same WebSocket-based protocol that the mobile devices use, so that it's pretty fast now. It's not something that we have implemented in production yet, because it's relatively new. We're kind of doing POCs, we're experimenting with it, but I think we are at a stage where we want to go live with this kind of a change for us. So again, it's something that we were looking forward to, and something that we recently got from Couchbase. So this is all in terms of the older versions of Couchbase, the journey over the last couple of years. What Couchbase has also just recently done is introduced a 3.0 release, and given that it's a .0 release, it's got a bunch of new features that got me really, really excited. We are looking at embracing some of these features as soon as possible, because they open up so many possibilities for us. Till date, all the configuration that we had in Sync Gateway was in a config file, if you will, that was residing on the virtual machine where Sync Gateway was running. And then if you have multiple Sync Gateways in production, each Sync Gateway was kind of its own thing, and you had to sort of make sure that every Sync Gateway has the right configuration. None of that happens anymore with the modular configuration that was introduced in 3.0. You sort of set up one Sync Gateway, and then you have the ability to hit REST endpoints, change your configuration through those REST endpoints, and then the other Sync Gateways in that cluster, if you will, just catch up with the modular configuration that you have provided with one Sync Gateway. So this is something by itself that got me so excited that I wanted to move to Sync Gateway 3.0 as soon as possible. Again, given that we are a large enterprise, it's not something that we can do overnight. We have to do our own testing and research and just make sure that everything works for us. But we're super excited to start down this path to see what modular configuration has to offer to us, and move to 3.0 as soon as possible. Another thing, secure administration for the Sync Gateway APIs. So till date, what we had to do was come up with our own method to call some of these admin APIs that Sync Gateway introduced, right? So what happens is, in the previous versions of Sync Gateway, if you wanted to call an admin API, you could do it from within the virtual machine or within the machine where Sync Gateway was running. And the admin endpoints were not exposed outside of that machine. All of that changes with secure administration. You no longer need to use any reverse proxy or SSH tunneling or anything of that sort to get to your admin APIs. You just have a username, password. You expose it over outside of the machine where Sync Gateway is running, and you can call those endpoints. And for us, calling an admin endpoint like the user endpoint to register a new user, assign them channels, it was super important. And we kind of had a hack to make it work. And I think with the secure administration, it's going to make a lot of sense for us. X address for channel access control. Now, this is something that I've been asking Priya for a long time. Got introduced in 3.0. It's something that's got me super excited, right? So I want to talk about this a little more and tell you why this makes a lot of sense. So till now, most your channel assignment logic, it could look at a field within a document and then say, hey, based on this property, I'm going to go assign a channel, right? But what that meant is we had to embed the channel specific or the routing logic within the document itself. And if you think about it from a business standpoint, these are things that generally don't belong there, right? Or may not belong there. So for example, if I'm talking about a customer document, why do I need information related to, which user should have access to that customer in the customer document itself? It's got to reside somewhere outside. So with the X address for channel access control, that's what Sync Gateway offers us now. All of this information can be embedded in the X address or the metadata within Couchbase, within the document, right, on the Couchbase server, and then the Sync Gateway is able to access that information and do channel access control. It's a big deal for us. Again, there were certain document types for us where the literal size of the document was smaller than the list of channels where the document needed to be synced. So imagine a scenario where you have a pretty small document, like 10 lines JSON properties within the document, but it needs to be distributed to 20,000 users, right? And for whatever reason, right, we kind of had to embed each and every user's channel in there. So the list of channel was larger than the document itself, much larger. And the worst part was, anytime you had to change a user or make that document not go to a user or something, any changes related to channels, right, the document was mutated, which means every single user that has access to that document, 20,000 of those guys, see a change to that document, which was totally unnecessary. It was just a lot of noise. So with this feature, all of that is going to get fixed. Super excited about this new feature. Then there's another one coming along in 3.0, which is purge or document purge on access revocation. So till now, and again, in our enterprise, we have requirements where if a user loses access to a channel, that document has to be deleted from the database, from the SQLite database. And we had to write our custom purge rules for this. With 3.0, again, the user loses access to a channel, Couchbase internally takes care of getting rid of that document from the database. It allows me to get rid of all this custom, cleaners that we had to write on the mobile side, right? So again, super excited about this new feature and looking forward to it. So the gist of all that I'm trying to say here is, over the last few years that I've been using Couchbase, I have seen a huge, a lot of changes being introduced to the product. And all of these changes are sort of helping us developers and architects implement newer use cases and do things in a more efficient way, if you will, within both the mobile side as well as the server side. So super excited to see what's coming next. I know there was a question about scopes and collections support for Sync Gateway. It's been something that even I have been asking for. So looking forward to when Priya and team can get that out for us. So with that, I'm gonna pause. That's all I have for you today.
Well,
Opportunity.
Hey, Nitish, can we bring everybody back on the stream? So one, thank you for sharing the experience. That's pretty amazing, right? So I think I can summarize what you're saying is that, one, we tend to listen to people that are using our product, right? We're a very agile shop. And when developers come to us and say, hey, we like this feature, but maybe you can enhance it this way, we take that serious if enough people want it, right? I mean, we're not this type of old school, we're not the old ironclad company that is like, no, we'll tell you what features you need. We'll tell you how this works. We're not that. I don't want to say the O word, but I'm just going to say, we're not that type of company, right? And that's a big thing that you can come to, and that's what this community is all about: is sharing those experiences and making people know we're all developers here. We all care about the product line. We all care about trying to make the best experience for people, and obviously with that, we would love to have every feature come out like tomorrow, right? But that's just not how the world works. You're all software developers. We all know this, right? Even our users, when we're building mobile apps for our users are crying to us saying, where's this feature at? And that pain point, right? Because you build mobile apps, you build enterprise applications, and the agile process, right? And so that's what we are, an agile shop. We do things as best we can. We iterate, we improve. And I think you've seen that over the last 4 or 5 releases, right? That we've constantly given new features. We're not just bug fixing. We are literally trying to give more functionality to people based on what we hear. Obviously we have great ideas. I think Priya's got some really great ideas for the future, which I can't talk about. But I definitely think that we have some really great ideas what's going to be the future. And that's why I say it's bright. I said that the future has been bright and it's going to continue to be bright. Anyways, we did throw out your LinkedIn there if people want to go ahead and connect with you. Obviously, you're on the socials also. Just real quick here, I guess, just want to do a quick round robin and stuff. So also I want to introduce Peter. Peter is one of our new developer advocates. He also has a massive amount of experience and stuff. And Peter, you want to just do a quick introduction? Just let the community know who you are.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for that, everybody. That was really amazing. I learned a lot. So I'm still in a really hardcore phase of learning. I started with Couchbase only a few months ago. It feels like a lot longer, but I think it's about 3 months. So yeah, I'm still hacking my way through a bunch of stuff. So I'm learning a lot. So I feel for all the developers out there in terms of going through the experience. And I mean, just one thing I've got to say is I'm really, really excited by Couchbase. It's an amazing bunch of technologies with some amazing people in the company also. So that's pretty good. Before I was with Huawei for about just over a year, working on HMS Core, Huawei mobile services, and also building out developer communities and the advocacy team. And then for 9 years before that, I was with Google in London, also in London. I'm currently based in London. So yeah, working on a bunch of stuff there, from Android developer relations all the way through to Google Maps and the Geo SDKs, and then kind of like more product engineering, I guess, or partner engineering, working with top partners to kind of address their pain points. So all else I'll say is that before that, I'm not going to go into it. I mean, I started like literally programming when I was, my first paid job as a programmer on IBM mainframes was in 1986. And since then, I've just gone through like one cycle after another. So yeah.
It's amazing. Fun fact, I think I've told you this before, Peter, but in 2012, I read your book on Android development because you literally wrote one of the first books on Android development. And
well, that was my cunning plan to get into Google, right?
Yeah. I mean, I literally, I worked at a hospital and we had an iOS app because I was an Object-C programmer and I knew iOS really, really well by then. And we had a doctor come with an Android phone, and we were at a hospital that bought the phones for him, and he was like, I'm not using this iOS device. I must use an Android device. I'm like, oh, no. So then I had to go buy a book and figure out, like, okay, how do I build a Java app in Android and stuff? And it was like, literally, that was one of my first experience with Android, was literally reading your book. And, of course, calling Google, because then afterward, we were like, oh, this is... Back in the old days, it was a little bit more difficult than it is now. I'll just leave it at that.
Android's come a long way.
It's come a long way, to say the least. So very, very cool. Well, folks, the Couchbase Lite 3 is out there. It's been great. We had a great beta. There's a lot of features out there for you. Obviously, everyone was talking about all these things that they want to see and stuff. So I highly recommend you go out there and check it out. All of our tutorials have been updated. So if you go to the developer portal, you'll get access to the learning paths, and they walk you through getting up. If you're new to this and maybe you're a Swift developer, but you've never used an embedded database before, we've got you covered. We've got great examples that explain just how to use it as a standalone database. We have it where we show you sync, and we start getting you into the understanding of these live queries and all these other things that you can kind of do. And also we are, I guess, I usually don't like to comment of what we're working on literally right now this sprint, but I will say that we are working on a couple new tutorials, and there'll be the peer-to-peer tutorials. We're updating those, and we have a big process. We're an Agile shop, but we also make sure that all the tutorials continue to work. We put unit tests. We talked about this a couple meetups ago, where how we do tutorials now is a little bit different. We have unit tests to guarantee they always work, so you don't have to get a sad face when you download the tutorial and it doesn't work. That doesn't happen anymore. Because we make sure that happens. So we do have some new tutorials coming out, and the peer-to-peers will definitely be coming in the next couple of weeks, where we'll have some demos of really doing cool stuff with peer-to-peer. So that's definitely in literally my bucket this sprint that I'm working through and trying to get up and running. And we also have some new tutorials for first-time comers Kotlin. So that's going to be really cool. And I know Peter will be working on some stuff with Flutter, right, Peter? So we've got some really cool stuff that's and then by the time we talk to you next month at the meetup, should be up on the website. And so stay tuned, as the month of March mobile, will continue through probably to April mobile. At least in my world, every month is mobile.
Yeah, every month.
So awesome, folks. Let's check here and see if we have any other questions in the community here. Priya, Daniel, and we really thank you a lot for coming on and sharing our passion and our love for mobile with us, and letting the community know what's kind of out there. A couple quick things before you go. One, I need to give the biggest shout out to the development team. The development team worked their butt off to get this release out, and people like Blake and Jens, and there's too many people to name all of them, but I just want to say, you guys are my heroes. You guys put this release out. It was awesome. The beta was really stable. I was like, literally none of my code changed between beta 2 and production. I just changed the version number, and everything just continued to work. I think it was really great, and that really does speak to the developers. They're all passionate about the product. They all love the product, and we really are trying to ship the best possible software out to those. So, man, once again, thanks to the entire development team for just making this a really great release with all these new features and stuff. The last thing I want to kind of mention is that Couchbase's blog has been updated. There's a new blog post I wrote on queries and talking about query sharing between server and mobile, which is absolutely a thing you could do now that we have this new feature of SQL++. Of course, I have some caveats there that you have to think about, things like indexing and things that you probably are not thinking about when you just cut and paste that query in, right? Queries, you got to make sure you understand indexes and how that works. So that's kind of all explained in that blog article. But the other thing is our CEO, Matt, kind of put a quick post out there about the Ukraine and situation there. It's a very emotional thing. And so I'm just going to say, hey, look, you know what? Human life is the most important thing, I think, in this planet. It is the most critical thing. It's the thing that's most precious. And nobody at Couchbase supports anybody trying to take that away for any reason whatsoever. That's garbage. And so we definitely, absolutely, go read the blog post if you want to learn more. But we stand with you, and human life is precious. Nobody should take it away. So that's terrible. But thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next month in the next meetup. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.